The elections were held, the counting of the votes began, it became clear that the PRD would lose the election. And at that point, and not for the first time in the history of Panama or many other countries in Central America, the military rulers halted the electoral process.
The country erupted in violence as ballot boxes were seized. The U.S.-supported candidates who had been leading in vote tallies were brutally beaten on the streets of Panama City in front of rolling TV cameras. The assailants were alleged to be Noriega's Dignity battalions, although none were ever identified. It was a photo opportunity that crystallized world public opinion against Noriega.
Good evening. The violence in Panama escalated sharply this evening when government goons attacked candidates opposed to General Manuel Noriega.
Were attacked and beaten up on the streets of Panama City. Guillermo Endara,
and one of the opposition presidential candidate, was beaten and injured during the day by backers of military.
Later, the presidential candidate Endara was released from the hospital. It has been confirmed that he was attacked by goons.
The following day, President Bush ordered 2,000 additional troops into Panama.
I will do what is necessary to protect the lives of American citizens, and we will not be intimidated by the bullying tactics, brutal though they may be, of the dictator Noriega.
After the election fiasco, the Panamanian National Assembly declared a state of emergency and appointed Noriega head of state. George Bush now openly encouraged the Panamanian military to revolt against Noriega.
But we'd love to see him get him out. We'd like to see him out of there.
With support and encouragement from the United States, a group of officers from the Panamanian Defense Forces, the PDF, began planning a military coup to overthrow Noriega. They secretly met several times with the U.S. Southern Command to coordinate support for the overthrow.
The role to be played by the United States Army was to block certain roads, make sure that certain airfields were not made available for use by elements loyal to or potentially loyal to General Noriega.
With these assurances, the insurgent troops launched the coup attempt. They quickly overpowered Noriega's guards, seized the PDF headquarters, and captured Noriega. But the Americans did not carry through on their promises. Forces loyal to Noriega were allowed to gain entrance and crush the rebellion, freeing General Noriega. President Bush later denied any U.S. involvement in the operation.
This was some American operation, and I can tell you that is not true. But I would repeat, in the hopes that it be conveyed instantly to Panama, we have no argument with the Panamanian Defense Forces. We have no argument with them. We've had good relations with the Panamanian Defense Forces.
But investigative journalist Doug Vaughn, who was in Panama during the failed coup attempt, disputes Bush's claims.
That the idea, at least on the American side, was to lead these coup plotters along, to seduce them into believing that they had the support of the United States, and then at a critical moment abandon them, so that then the excuse could be made that we had to smash the PDF completely, that we couldn't rely anymore on disgruntled officers inside the Panamanian army to rise up against Noriega, and we would have to do this job ourselves.
After the October coup attempt, 1,300 additional U.S. troops were flown into Panama, and offensive military equipment was secretly deployed. The U.S. military stepped up its campaign of intimidation and provocation, setting up roadblocks, confronting PDF forces, and conducting offensive military maneuvers outside of U.S. jurisdiction.
They have blocked passage here, calling it a security problem. What security? The Panamanian people would never threaten them. They are the ones threatening. They are the ones who charged at us with their weapons. What's wrong with them?
They charge the bayonets at us. They charge us with their bayonets in order to scare us. They said not to step onto that area, but they're on our side. It's Panama's jurisdiction. So what the hell's with them?
It came to an inch that day the killing didn't start, because the tanks and everything were ready to go in to kill the Panamanian people.
In the final months before the invasion, the Army Special Operations Command sent a highly secret Delta Force team to Panama.
There were numerous actions undertaken by that Delta team which were reported in the United States press as provocations undertaken by Panamanians against the United States. Infiltrations of United States positions, shots fired in the direction of United States perimeters and positions, roughing up of United States citizens in the streets.
Sabina Virgo, a national labor organizer, was in Panama just weeks before the invasion.
Provocations against the Panamanian people by United States military troops were very frequent in Panama, and they had several results, and in my opinion, probably a couple of different intents. One, I think, was to create an international incident, was to have United States troops just hassle the Panamanian people until an incident resulted. And from that incident, the United States could then say that they were going into Panama for the protection of American life, which is in fact exactly what happened.
On the night of December 16th, a group of U.S. Marines ran a military roadblock in front of PDF headquarters and were fired on by Panamanian guards. Lieutenant Robert Bolivar Paz, a U.S. Marine intelligence officer, was killed. The Marines were reported to be part of a group called the Hard Chargers, known for provoking confrontations with PDF forces. The Pentagon claimed the Marines were unarmed and lost, but local witnesses said that they were armed and exchanged fire with the PDF headquarters, wounding a soldier and 2 civilians.
An American serviceman has been killed in a weekend shooting incident.
What U.S. officials called an example of General Noriega's cruelty and brutality.
Shooting death of an American officer, which President Bush condemned today as an outrage.
And that in another incident, a Navy officer and his wife were detained. He beaten and threatened with death. She threatened sexually.
Another American serviceman also threatening that man's wife. Strong public support for a reprisal was all but guaranteed.
4 days later, on December 20th, U.S. troops invaded Panama. The invasion was codenamed Operation Just Cause. Shortly after midnight, U.S. troops simultaneously attacked 27 targets, many of which were in densely populated areas. One of the primary targets in Panama City was the headquarters of the Panamanian Defense Forces, located in the crowded neighborhood of El Chorrillo. U.S. troops shelled the area for 4 hours before moving in and calling for surrender.
We ask you to surrender. If you do not, we are prepared to level each and every building. Surrender now.
About 10 minutes after they've been speaking this surrender, surrender, we start to hear the helicopters start to bomb the quartel and start to use their laser ray and things like that. So we hit the ground.
It soon became clear that the objectives were not limited only to military targets. According to witnesses, many of the surrounding residential neighborhoods were deliberately attacked and destroyed.
The helicopters were heavily armed, firing powerful machine guns and rockets, and they were firing indiscriminately. They weren't just looking for military targets. They were firing at many civilians. People were running all over, trying to escape.
They shot at everything that moved, without mercy and without thinking whether they were children or women or people fighting. Instead, everything that moved, they shot.
We all thought that they would just take Noriega. They said that's what they wanted. They would take him and would respect everyone else.
After the bombing been going on for a few hours, the soldiers tell everybody to come out with their hand on their head, and they direct us to the church. When we were in the church about 6 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden, the building started to burn in front of the church. The people, as they know the only thing they have was inside the place, they tried to run out to get water to halt it. And the American soldiers tell them to get out. Some people, you know, stubborn, they try to go in, and the American soldiers, he shot it up in the air. And the people that get scared, and they run back.
We saw that the North Americans were denying people access to their homes. They sent people back and threatened them with their machine guns and forbid anyone to get close to the houses or walk in or around the alleys leading to the houses. Then they began to set the houses on fire.
The Panamanian soldiers, them, know each alley, how to go in and how to come out and where to go and come through, you know, from one street to another street, climb up and go to a balcony and things. So the only way I think the American soldiers could get rid of that danger was to burn down the building then. That way the Panamanian soldier couldn't have nowhere to hide.
I'm unaware of any operations by U.S. military to go through and systematically burn down buildings. You get fires that are started by weapons, but I haven't seen any reports of U.S. military folks going through and setting buildings on fire.
The North Americans began burning down El Chorrillo at about 6:30 in the morning. They would throw a